Hey everybody, we're here for a very special 1982 video. I have a bunch of co-hosts with me this time. First up is Michele Kisner. I always do that.
Everybody does, don't feel bad.
She's a movie critic and she has a website. She does like essays for a bunch of new releases and things like that. You did one for Mute Witness and a couple other ones you had?
Yeah. The last one I did that was like, that's actually just coming out, is for the BFI release for Chronos. I'm on that release. So that should be coming out here in a week or two, or probably it's probably out now, but it's overseas, so it's gonna take a little bit for everybody to get it.
Awesome. She was actually on the Basket Case episode with Art Editor. So Next up, we have Duncan McLeish from podcast Under the Stairs and the Diabolical Summer series. Duncan's been reviewing movies for over 10 years at least, right? Over 10 years.
Easy at this stage.
Duncan has been on the show a bunch of times. From 1980 to 80. I know you were on the show probably like almost half a dozen times now, at least 3 or 4.
Yeah, a good few, and we always seem to pick really interesting movies to talk about, and I'm very excited about this one because this was his first time watch for me, so
super cool.
And then last, we got the true host of the show, as the joke goes, Bruce Holecheck. From Cinema Arcana. He's contributed to numerous Blu-rays and things like that, often does commentaries with Art Editor, and he is partially responsible for this thing getting a nice release from Mondo Macabro in 2017, 18? I can't remember.
It was a long time gestating, but we can get into that a little bit later. But there's some fun behind the scenes stuff to discuss. Long time favorite film of mine. So we'll just start with saying Guten Tag.
The plot's fairly simple. We have a obsessed 16-year-old girl in Germany named Simone. She becomes obsessed with a popular musical artist just entitled R, pretentious. And the obsession becomes deadly as she just begins to like badger and ignore, and eventually makes like an unoccupied like road trip to meet R when he's doing like a special appearance on a television show. And of course it's going to turn deadly. In the long line of obsessive fan films like Perfect Blue, or I saw somebody compare this movie to one of the Angel Guts movies, the one from 81. And I was like, okay, that's very, very prevalent. And those movies are the one I've seen a couple of those are actually kind of underrated. I think that people think the title Angel Guts, they're like, oh, it's just no, they're really kind of sophisticated for Nakatsu movies. Right. But this is an interesting film. We can just talk about first impressions and a little bit of the pre-production. The director is a very prolific guy, a very interesting guy, racketeer guy, did everything. So let's just hop in. Who wants to have some first words on it?
Yeah, and we probably should mention that, it's the movie itself's a bit of a slow burn that does kind of build up to a certain climax, which I don't think we'll really be able to discuss the film without mentioning some major spoilers. So hopefully, if the listeners haven't seen this movie before, they'll seek it out because it really, really is a great film. I don't want to ruin anything for someone who hasn't seen the movie before. So I'll let everybody else get into their first experiences because mine's a little bit long-winded and self-indulgent. So.
I actually, the first time I saw it was when the Mondo Macabro release came out. I blind bought it, and I was blown away. I was like, what? I'd never heard of that movie prior. So whenever that came out, 2017 or whatever, 18, I was absolutely blown away. One of the best blind buys I've ever had. Like, I was just, it blew my mind that I just never heard of that movie prior to that, because it seems like it would be something that a lot of people would talk about, but apparently not. Even now when I bring it up, like I said, I was watching it on Facebook yesterday, rewatching it, and everybody's like, oh, the one with Wesley Snipes, because there's like so many movies that are called The Fan, and everybody wants to be the first person to make that joke, but it's just such a it's a dark movie, and it's almost it's very kind of dreamlike in some ways that and I really like the aspect of it, kind of like it's following the diary of the Simone. So you get to hear all her internal monologue as she's trying to parse these like obsessive compulsive thoughts about this, pop star. And I just think it's like a really interesting angle to take with the material. When I first saw it, I kind of thought it reminded me a little bit of Audition as well. Just the idea of a woman that has something seriously mentally wrong with her becoming obsessed with a romantic interest to the point where she destroys him because he doesn't want her in the way that she wants him to want her, so that's just my thoughts on it. Fantastic film. I thought it was even better the second time I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Go
ahead, Duncan.
I was going to say, first time view for me, so I didn't actually know what to expect at all, if I'm honest. Out with the fact that Dave had certainly said to me, I think this could be a good one, and knowing the sort of stuff you like, if you're interested, go for it. So I've now watched it twice. So I watched it one yesterday and then today again. The first viewing, I was completely floored. I would go as far as to say this is now one of those kind of hidden gems for me that will rocket up, I know for a fact, on subsequent viewings. The second watch, just merely 24 hours later, slapped even harder for me, just in terms of the connection. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of so much. I love this movie. I was going to say it's lesser known. It's not lesser known now because it's been out in Blu-ray by lots of different companies. There's a movie from '87 called White of the Eye, which is a kind of American giallo slasher, but the cinematography and the score, is very prominent. There's lots of shots that are just like beautifully artistically designed compositions. And watching this is kind of like the German version of this, very art house, very beautiful to look at, but at the same time, very cold cinematography, but soft, that kind of almost Vaseline lens sort of approach. Really, really good. I love the approach to the kind of inner monologue. I love movies that do that as well, because you're getting the thoughts of a person as opposed to their actual actions. And sometimes, as critics, we try and delve behind what might be the character's motivation, and sometimes hearing their inner monologue just kind of nulls that for you. The idea of obsession just in general is something that's always fascinated me. We all have either obsessed about something or know someone that has obsessed about something that is to someone else questionable. It's a thing where we can't quite wrap our heads around why someone would be fixated on a particular thing, person. But with me, it's music. Generally, I like music on the slightly more extreme side, so I generally butt heads with people that can't understand why I like, or even horror movies, why I like the things I do. And in this one here, what I love about it is the idea that, like that was already said, that this character is obsessed with art, but at the same time there is an underlying mental health issue, which means that what she wants will never actually be enough. Right. Even when she achieves what she gets, is still not enough. And even down to, and we can't spoil it, but the actual all-encompassing act that happens in here still doesn't necessarily fulfill the obsession of the character. And that's what obsession is. Like, no one that is obsessed with anything is ever fulfilled. It's sadly always going to be a chasm which you can keep putting things into and you will never be satisfied. I think this movie actually does it better than the majority of movies I've seen, specifically dealing with the idea of obsession of any item or person. This, like, we will obviously get further into it, but right across, this had me from like the opening bar of music and cinematography right through at the credits at the end. I thought this was absolutely brilliant.
So the first time I watched this, I was probably initially when the Blu-ray came out, and I had heard about, there's 3 movies called The Fan. They're all about obsession, and this is clearly the best of the bunch, I think. I mean, you got 81, without a doubt. You got 81's Michael Biehn. We should mention these. With who's he obsessing over in that one? I can't. Isn't
it like Catherine Bacall or somebody, or
it is
Lauren Bacall.
Lauren Bacall. You think Catherine? Yeah, Lauren Bacall. It's not a bad film. It's not nearly as good as this, or as interesting.
It's Michael Biehn, right? Doesn't he? There's one great line in it, and I'm not going to remember what it is, but it's something like, "I'm going to fuck you with a knife," or something like, it's something like really vulgar, but like really campy and hilarious.
It definitely has like the gay campy like appeal to it, because there's like closet case stuff with him, and But then there's, of course, the 1996 Tony Scott movie, which is kind of hilarious. I remember saw it when it came out.
Let's go, Bobby!
I only think back on comedy. Like, I'm going on a diatribe here, but I just can't. I have to mention it because I don't know how many more chances I'm going to get to mention the fact that poor old Charles Holohan from 1982 is The Thing. He goes and picks him up out of nowhere. Not seeing the guy for 20 years. He's like, let's go play baseball. And he's like, what are you doing here? And they go play baseball and he realizes he kidnapped the kid. He's like, get out of here, kid, run. And he starts beating him with a baseball bat. This is comedy. But yeah, this one, I remember liking it. And I had not watched it since. I remember it just being a good movie. It's I don't know, probably 6 years ago. Is still a little complex, for me. It's not one that you walk away. You're kind of just put in a trance by it, which is its alternative name. Music's fantastic. I think the music is really strong in it. And I like the backdrop because there's these movies that they have a certain look to it. You don't register what it is and you realize, oh, it's fucking filmed in West Germany behind the Berlin Wall. And it's like you think Tenderness of the Wolves was, or Suspiria has that shit, or Possession. Possession's the number one. They open the fucking thing going across the wall. It just kind of creates like an isolated, claustrophobic kind of feel to it. I think she's fantastic in it. The idea that a lot of people just ignore mental illness. It's funny, we go through all the same shit over and over again, and we still do the same shit. It's not much has changed. It's just I guess we interpret it or look at it different ways. It's a good film. It's incredibly well made. It's well acted, and the ending. It's one of those things that on paper incredibly fucked up. So as you watch it, it's not that fucked up to watch it. You're like, oh yeah, and then this happens, and we're gonna probably get into spoilers at the end. But like on the like taboo list, it's like, yeah, we got cannibalism, we got underage sex, we got all these kind of really fucked up shit. But as you watch it, you're not registering how crazy it is. But
I mean, it's still kind of fucked up. Like
it is, but it's not what you think, like like Cannibal Holocaust kind of shit.
Right.
It is like subject matter.
Well, and for as extreme as the content is, it's not particularly a graphic film, which I think it's kind of handled differently. But we'll get into all that a little bit later, I guess.
The director's an interesting guy. His history and everything plays perfectly into this. There's a reason why he could make this. But he made kind of two other movies that are loosely in a trilogy. Gold of Love, which came out a year later in '83. I guess we'll just go into these now. And
do you want me to talk about my first experience?
Yeah.
Look, everybody else gets their moment. And what you just want to,
you said you're just long-winded. So I'm trying to get some out before we have to hear 37 pages.
Look, pal. All right. So 4 score and no. So my first hearing of the film, the first time the movie got on my radar was actually a review in Deep Red magazine. I picked up an issue of that in the 90s, and Stephen Bissette had actually wrote it up for the Gore Score section. Stephen Bissette, of course, being the a comic book artist involved in Swamp Thing and Constantine and all that stuff, and of course a phenomenal film critic as well. So he had wrote a positive review of it under its VHS title Trance in Deep Red magazine. I read that, and it sounded like a movie that was kind of along the lines of my interests. It sounded, he gave it a very positive review. So it was on my radar for a couple of years, and I never came across a copy. It wasn't exactly a common tape in those days. So it wasn't until about 1998 when I was on tour with my old band. And we were down in Florida at the time playing a couple shows. And, in between shows, we were kind of running around. And of course, being a VHS nut at the time, anytime we would stop somewhere, I'd go and try to find VHS tapes. And we were out at some restaurant in like Pembroke Pines, Florida or something. And in the same shopping center, there was like this video store. So I went in there and I was looking around, and literally every tape in the store was for sale. It was this huge store. And I'm going through there and I'm finding all this shit that I had never seen before. And one of the tapes that I did find was a copy of Trance on NPY Video, which now NPY Video is actually a Canadian video label. So the fact that this was down in Florida, pretty much as far away from Canada as you can get in the US, I was just like, are you kidding me? So going through the store, I grabbed 45 tapes or something. And I'm just, as I'm going around, I'm finding all these tapes. I'm coming back to the front counter, putting them on there. I'm like, let me look some more. So I had all this stuff, and they were all marked like, $10, $8. I said, look, if I buy all this stuff, what can you guys do for me? Can you give them to me for like, $4 a pop or whatever? And the girl at the register was like, oh, I just work here. I can't make deals like that. And I said, okay, well, I can't afford all of this stuff. I said, here, I'll just pick these, 10 titles that I want, like real bad. I'll just buy these. And I said, do you want me to put away the rest? She's like, no, it's okay. I said, all right, if you're sure. I said, I don't mind. So she started ringing me up for these, 10 tapes that I really, really wanted. There was a couple Mogul tapes in there I didn't have, which was a label I collected at the time. And of course, Trance, which I'd been dying to see for years at that point. And instead of taking those other tapes and putting them away, she just kind of started putting them also in the bags and then just gave them to me. I was like, okay, and just kind of like took them and then just left the store. So I got like 50 tapes for the price of like 10.
Nice.
So I was like, I can't argue with this. And I mean, it was like all this like super rare shit that like I hadn't seen anywhere else, like all these like weird Video City titles like Messalina, Empress of Rome, and all this crap that I was really, really wanting. So of course I get back to the van with the rest of my bandmates with bags full of tapes. Now we had no room anyway because it was like 7 dudes in a van in the South in August, and everybody's like hot as hell, and like we had no room because we had all our instruments in there, full drum sets and amps and all sorts of stuff. So they were so pissed off at me for getting like another like 50 tapes that they actually made me like I had to buy like this little carry-on like sort of like small suitcase thing and strap it to the roof. And I was so scared that like these tapes were going to melt while we're driving around through these like 100-degree heats, in August in the South. But finally, when we got home from tour, like another like 2 weeks later, it was literally the first tape I watched. I watched it the night I got home from tour at like 3 a.m. and put it on, and I was literally transfixed. And it like you guys were saying, it's one of those movies where from frame one, it kind of puts you into her perspective, and her, with her being the narrator, and some, possibly an unreliable narrator, you don't even know. It kind of forces you into this female perspective of this obsession. And, as it goes on, you realize that, she's not obsessed with him. She doesn't really know him at all. Nobody knows him. She's obsessed with the idea of him. And it's, like Duncan was saying, that's something that's unattainable. You can't consummate a relationship with an idea. But yeah, literally, I was completely wrapped up in the film. The music, the score hits, it's really hypnotic, and you kind of, once you're in. If you can kind of get in sync with this movie's vibe, it's really, really something special. So yeah, that was my first experience with Trance, and I've loved it ever since. So
I love the cover on your VHS. It really leans into making it look like it's soft porn.
Right.
Is that English dub?
Yeah, it's English dubbed. It's slightly letterboxed. So yeah, it says Star Frenzy Deed Fan. And the back cover, of course, no pictures or anything.
That's when you know it's good. Like
However,
Maniacs.
Literally, like if you see all this text on there, it spells out the entire fucking movie. It's
of course it does.
Right. So yeah.
How's the English dub? Is it weird? Like, how does it sound?
I like it.
It's on
I think
the
it's
blue.
fine.
It's a little sillier. If you watch
I
it
didn't
after,
watch the English dub. Yeah, I didn't watch it.
I put it on just to hear it. It's really silly.
Well, see, here's the thing. So, I've gotten into this on commentary tracks before, like even like Contraband, which is kind of a crappy dub. And like I was, Nathaniel and Troy were both like, oh, the English dub stinks. Watch it in Italian. I'm like, well, I'm a sucker for English dubs. And, seeing this movie in English, that was how I first saw it. Yeah. And that's how I watched it for years. Because even the first DVD that came out, I think it was a UK DVD, it had the German track on there, but I don't think it had subtitles. So basically, you just, you had to watch it in English. So I pretty much until the Mondo Macabro DVD, I did not have Blu-ray. I did not have a copy of it that was in German with English subtitles. So like literally, I'm just so used to watching it in English. Even when I rewatched it for this, I just watched it in English because that's just how I'm used to seeing it.
Very rarely, if it's an Italian movie or a Hong Kong movie, I always go to English first. I just have to, just because the way I watched them early on, it's like, besides like Untold Story, I watched that. I don't even know if there's an English dub of Untold Story. If there is, I never knew about it.
There's not. I've never seen one. No, right.
With the sheer amount of internal dialogue, it doesn't really matter, if you know what I mean. So you're not having to sync up dialogue with
Right.
a mouth that isn't saying the words. So if anything, actually, that's maybe not the. It would be different if it was like heavily based. Like, if it was a Tarantino movie, you know, it would just like fast-paced dialogue. Yes, then a dub doesn't work. But in the case of this one, actually, I like from my perspective, I like did the subtitles, but I can't imagine it having a huge impact. So like fill in a little bit of detail here, because having watched it like a second time and like being on here with people that are more scholarly with the knowledge behind this one here. The actual musician in this one is actually the guy that did the score.
Rheingold. Rheingold was the band name.
Right, I'm going to track this down.
A couple albums right after this, and the guy was Bobo. Geez, I can't remember. He recently died in 2019, and he
Bodo Staiger.
He continued his music career in was it Ghana, making music there. Like I hear these stories about that.
Yeah, and
interesting person. He was like in his early 30s when he made this too, and I could have swore the guy was 20.
Yeah, I think he was like I think he was like 31 or something. I think he was born in like 69 or 59. So he and again considerably older than his female lead. Which, you know, if you historically look into like stalking cases and obsession cases, when it's a female aggressor, you know, usually it is statistically said that, you know, it is with an older guy, usually significantly older. One final word about the trance tape. So the last one of these I've seen go for sale actually went for over $1,000. So
don't broadcast that on here. Tell people that.
Which makes my deal seem all that even better. Like even with the $9.95 sticker price, I think I made that
stink of Florida on it.
Right? Yeah. I think I made out in the long run.
That movie never got a U.S. release until that Blu-ray. It never had one. So that was Canadian. That's why when you said I have a VHS, I was like, how the fuck do you have a VHS? And you said it was Canadian. I was like, oh, because it got a UK
has no UK Blu-ray.
It has a UK tape.
It has a UK tape, but does not have a UK Blu-ray. So
find that tape. It's only going to cost you $1,000.
Yeah, and there's only been a few tapes around of it that I've seen. There's a Japanese tape under the title Trance as well. With a really cool cover with, you know, her licking the electric carving knife.
Of course she is.
Which I'm like, you know, spoilers, but whatever. And then, there was a brief German tape, but the movie actually ended up getting banned in Germany in 1983.
Does not surprise me.
Yeah, it was banned for 20 years until 2003 based on the Federal Department for the Examination of Publications Harmful to Young Persons. Apparently, you know, I mean, the movie was not without controversy, but the fact that it actually, even after all that, you know, the lawsuits and stuff, which I guess we'll get into at some point, it still ended up banned in Germany for over 20 years, which is crazy, until the remaster. But I mean, you know, I'm very happy that it's back out now, but I am surprised that it did not get, at least as far as I can tell, wider VHS distribution, because it seems like something that, you know, most countries would have picked up. And I don't know if maybe it did have something to do with the lawsuits or something, if maybe it wasn't being solicited as much. But yeah, it's like you guys had mentioned in the beginning, you know, how, you know, Michelle, I know that you had said, you know, you posted about it and so many people were like, oh, you know, what's this? And like so many people, you know, hadn't even heard of this thing until the Blu-ray came out. It's funny because even on like, you know, for internet forums like Blu-ray.com and stuff, I will see people, you know, always saying, oh my God, you know, I just watched The Fan for the first time and it was incredible. Where's this movie been? You know, it's really an underseen gem. And they're not wrong. It really is. But it's kind of surprising to me that it's still under the radar this, you know, after all these years. I mean, even that Blu-ray's been out for, you know, 10 years or 15 years or whatever. Right.
Mondo Macabro is always kind of slept on, to be honest. They just don't get the love that they should. And their movies, not everything they release is gold, but everything they release is something of interest. I've never been like, oh, that was a piece of shit. You know, like
it's usually obscure too, or like something that's like only have one release ever. You know, they get a lot of stuff. I think a lot of people like confuse some of these boutique companies with, you know, well, they should only release popular things, or, you know, but a lot of it's just preservation. Like, even if you don't think the movie itself is good, there's so many movies that get lost to format changes. Like there's like when everything was on VHS and then they went to DVD, there was a bunch of stuff that didn't go from VHS to DVD, and then again from DVD to Blu-ray, Blu-ray to 4K. Every time we change formats, there are all these movies that get lost behind, you know, and then the pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So I'm glad that there are all these companies like Vinegar Syndrome and whatnot that are out there like grabbing those films from way back on VHS that maybe that they're stuck on VHS, you know, and pulling them forward. It's just, I don't know, like I think people get too caught up in like, is the movie good in your subjective opinion, and not can we preserve these films for posterity.
100%. Every time one of these labels releases a movie that you see someone going, oh, I can't believe they wasted the time doing this in 4K, I'm thinking you don't like it, but for someone else it is their favorite movie. And this is the best version they're ever going to have. So to them, it means something. So, live and let live.
And also, people are so hung up on cardboard. I just want the fucking movie. If everything came in a Kino case, a black plain Kino case with the title on the side and the theatrical artwork on the front with a great premiere Blu-ray or 4K, I'd be so happy.
Exactly. My case is creased. My case is creased. No, I don't like that.
Well, and the other thing is, we're all, pretty much high volume film watchers. So at the end of the day, most of what we watch are just like 5s and 6s anyway. You know what I mean? Like not every movie has to be great. Some movies are just okay. Some movies are just fine. Some movies just have one good scene. But that's enough. They don't all have to be great. Now, thankfully, Trance or The Fan is great. And that, and that's one of those things that does kind of keep you stuck to these labels and keep watching movies you haven't seen before, because you never know when something like this is going to jump out at you. And yeah, Mondo Macabro is one of the few labels where they'll be releasing stuff that even I haven't seen, or and I've been watching 500-600 movies for the past decades. So yeah, I love the idea of companies releasing this stuff that is completely alien to me. I love nothing more than watching a movie that's new to me. Sure. I mean, there's always room to rewatch the greats as well, but I'm voracious when it comes to new material.
New piece of every puzzle. Like I say, there's a giant horror puzzle, and every time you watch something, you put another piece on that board until, and then every time you open up a new section, it's like a new world map. You're like, oh, I didn't know that these Indonesian movies. And then you're like, I watched 2 of them. And then you're like, what else? And then you're like, oh shit, I just opened the whole entire door. Now I have to watch 50 Indonesian snake movies.
Right.
And everybody
that happens to me like once a month. I'm just like, oh wow, and then I get so excited. I'm like, oh, there's like 50 more movies I've never heard of in my life, And then there's always that one person that's seen all the Indonesian snake movies, and they're like, "You haven't seen Snake Charmer 7? God!" Like,
my old joke was, "You ain't seen Zombie Bloodbath 2: Rage of the Undead?" it's a go-to joke, because it's just, you know what I mean? It's just always going to be something this year.
It's so funny because now I'm like, me and some buddies that do movie nights and stuff. We're to the point now where we're actually like watching mainstream stuff just because that's the stuff that we haven't seen before. We're like we're on a goddamn Elvis movie kick right now. We're going through Elvis movies, and we just, last year we were doing John Wayne movies and stuff. It's like the kind of stuff that like teenage me would be like, no way in hell would I ever be caught dead watching, John Wayne movies. And now we're watching it's like we're basically dads without kids. We're going through all this like old man shit.
Giving your dog life advice.
Right. Yeah.
Let me tell you something.
But they're great. It's always it's always fun to have more stuff to watch.
I guess we can get into the director a little bit. Eckhart Schmidt, really interesting guy. Started his film career in like the 60s, but he's done everything. He was a journalist for a magazine. He started like a new wave kind of punk magazine, which is where initially Durfan came from. He wrote a story that was basically made into this movie.
Yeah, he
obsessive fan culture that he studied and wrote articles on. So the guy's been from the beginning making movies, and he made movies up until his death in 2024. So
yeah, and it's weird. He started with a few movies in the 60s, including there's one that Subculture put out called Jet Generation that I picked up and I haven't watched yet. I probably should have watched it in prep.
They're more like popular movies, nothing like the fan. They're all like the popular kind of. He was from like a group, right? Like a special film
like
group
a collective. But they were, as compared to like some of these pretentious film groups that are like going out trying to make art, they were trying to make just pop entertainment. And then he moved into television for like pretty much the entirety of the 70s. So like his film career has like this really big gap in it. And like you said, he kind of moved into this sort of like popular punk scene, when he was getting he was publishing works by like Fassbinder and like David Byrne from Talking Heads and Patti Smith and stuff like that in this, you know, sort of like German punk zine. And that, like you said, that was the genesis of this project. He was publishing the stories that he wrote, basically, which were her diary entries, you know, so it would, you know, be this, you know, just completely her perspective, these sort of like journal entries. And they used that to kind of make the format of The Fan, Der Fan, which was his comeback film. You know, it was you know, after a 10-year absence, you know, he came back with this. And apparently he had some issues getting it funded, but eventually did. But you can talk more about the director.
But no, what's really strange about this is he was talking about like the obsession and stuff, and about the fandom, and how a big like pop star wants to have everyone love them, but at the same time they can't really give that love back because it's fabricated. It's actually genuinely creepy. You know, I think that we've gotten so far away from actually thinking about the what could happen putting yourself out there like this, for a fact. Like, so nowadays we all put ourselves out there. 15, 20 years ago, we rarely would ever put ourselves out.
Well, stalking wasn't a crime 15, 20 years ago. You know what I mean? It wasn't recognized as a crime, and which blows my mind now, because it so clearly is. You know, when someone is like invading your personal space to the point that you feel threatened, that to me feels like someone should do something about it. But we're like, it's not that people haven't recognized it, it's just that it wasn't acknowledged on the same level. And I think on some level as well, with this movie in particular, and I mentioned it before, like the idea of someone being is like obsessed with the idea and not with the person, not knowing what the person is like, but the idea of celebrity being something that requires that adoration. That's how income is made, is you obsess about something so much that you're willing to spend money on it, and that's how they generate. Like, that is still not solved now. So in 2025, you have musicians, artists, actors, or whatnot, still in the same position where they need that connection with their audience, but at the same time they want to have a private life, and it feels like we will never be able to work out how to make that happen, because as soon as you are in public, you no longer have that. You almost sign away any rights to having privacy as soon as you become famous. Right. And like in the case of this one, the way she goes about things is so interesting. Even linking it back to particular, see, even down to the, you know, I'm going to write him a letter that says if he winks at the screen, you know, like down to those like small details of like a wink at the screen. Like, people, like, you can interpret a wink about a million different ways. Right. But it's just so cleverly parsed in the movie. It doesn't surprise me this guy came from a background of journalism and music, in a lot of respects. That, if anything, gives him the insight. The same way I mentioned Tarantino again, don't know why, but the same way that Tarantino was like, I can make movies because I've seen them all. Like, you know, is that way where like if you are embedded in the culture and you know your scene, it makes it easier to transcribe that over and make it feel authentic. So the idea of, I think it's worse in music circles. I think that's why it connects better here. The baseball thing, with you know, that did never work for me, right? And once again, UK citizen, so like the baseball thing didn't work for me. But the idea of like we've all seen. You mentioned Elvis. We've seen what the crowds of young screaming girls were like. Like,
or the Beatles, right?
The Beatles is the one that comes to me. Like, if like. It was 2 steps away from like an apocalypse. I mean, right. They literally could have swarmed them and savaged them to death. And
I do think that the rise of those, you know, it kind of, you know, the rise of those two, you know, the Beatles and Elvis, were what kind of made a lot of people see the teen market as a viable option. So that's why, you know, during the 70s, you know, during that period when he was working in television, working with bands, was the rise of sort of like the teen fan culture, where we get, you know, all these magazines. And there's even shots in this of her going to the newsstand to pick up, you know, the latest, you know, teen rags sort of gossip magazines about all this stuff. And that's the 70s was when you kind of had these things being foisted upon a youth market, when they were seen as, we can really exploit this to our benefit. But yeah, like you're saying, it does have its repercussions. I know both Michele and you, Duncan, had mentioned, in your viewing of this, that we've all, when we were growing up, and we didn't know how to necessarily deal with our emotions, and as we were going through pubescence, we all had our fantasies about celebrities, we all had our interests, we all kind of went through this, we all had crushes on either musicians or actors or stuff. Not so, again, with me as well, not so much sports people. I can't not so much there, but
you didn't have any foodie flakes.
I know, right? Maybe like Oksana Bayul or something.
Yeah, and in the back of your head, if they just spoke to me, they just had one conversation, they would see how interesting a person I am.
Yes,
and they'd see how much, what I mean? It's on that level. It's your brain does weird things, especially when you're going through puberty, where it just the wires are connected in all the wrong ways,
or chemical imbalance.
Well, there's a term for it. It's called erotomania.
Really?
Yeah. So I guess when people go into manic states, it's very common. They'll get obsessed with, it's usually a famous person, like a celebrity or something, and they will think that celebrity is secretly in love with them. And then she does this in the movie too. In the movie, they will interpret anything the celebrity does as like secret signals to them alone.
Yeah.
This happens quite a bit actually, and it's probably even worse now with social media and everything, where back in the day, like you notice, like she could only see him every once in a while, like on a random TV show. She had to buy everything about, I think what's more interesting about this film as opposed to modern day is like, it's the analog approach to stalking that she had, because she had to like physically go to the post office, mail shit. She had to go buy a magazine and look at them in a magazine. She had
Kids
to
are lazy nowadays.
Yeah, I know.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
You're not wrong though.
But that's just the funny thing that people always say. They put it on everything. Well, kids are lazy; they didn't want to work. But no, you're 100% right. There was a lot more to it.
Avenues to stalk someone now. You can follow them on social media secretly and make alt accounts, and there's so many more avenues to stalk someone.
I now know how to make Matthew McConaughey's tuna sandwich. I shouldn't know how to make Matthew McConaughey's tuna sandwich.
On a side note, that shit sounded gross as hell. I was like,
it was
ass white people recipe is it?
Yeah,
all kinds of weird stuff in it.
Yeah, I think he just misinterpreted other ingredients for things like seasoning.
I think he was just high and made a gross ass tuna salad one time, and somebody found out about it. And now we all have to hear about his gross high guy.
I had the most bland breakfast I ever ordered. It was the best ingredients but no seasoning, and I was just I was eating it. I was like, this has no taste. It's good for me, but it has no taste. The one thing about obsession that you guys mentioned that's 100% accurate is the plausible deniability about it. The wink, can interpret that wink anyways. And even when she does meet R, which you never expect to happen in that way, which is so crazy. She meets him. And she doesn't blurt out all this shit right away. She's very, very nervous about it because she wants to keep that facade up, because if that facade is completely shattered, she'll snap like she does in the hallway when she screams. That's kind of her world crumbling and falling apart. Similar to the scene in The Invitation when I can't think of the guy from Drew Carey show, the good actor, the big guy, he kind of realizes everything's bullshit and he snaps and he screams and he just screams and he goes nuts. She kind of realized that the facade was shattered, but even after that facade is shattered and she doesn't get her way, she still carries it on through her different means in a term of rebirth, and that's true. She's not obsessed with him. She's obsessed with the idea of him. It's a projection. It's the kind of thing about, they make jokes about if somebody always is worried about something, physical appearance about themselves, if I lose these 3 pounds, I'll be happy. And then after they lose those 3 pounds, it'll be something else. If I can get rid of this, you're never going to be fucking happy. It's just you. It's just something wrong inside your head. It's chemical imbalance. And speaking of which, I had a medical issue and they prescribed me prednisone, which is a steroid. And I was fine for 3-4 weeks. And about the 5th week, I started to have a breakdown and started obsessing over insane things and going crazy, which has never happened to me. And I was like, because you always hear people, it's just a chemical imbalance. They're not actually, they're sick. And you're like, no, they're crazy. And you're just ignorant and stupid. because you don't expect, like, what it happens to you, you're like, oh, I understand this completely. That there's just actively something wrong with your brain right now. And I just had that, took a long time, and I just was not acting normal. I was acting obsessive. And I'm already an obsessive person. We're collectors, we're obsessive. But it was just, it sometimes it gets pushed on certain things that you overthink things. Well, this person said this, do they mean this? Maybe they're this, maybe they're doing this. Do you think they mean this? People are like, I don't fucking know, it doesn't matter. In reality, most people don't give a shit what you're doing.
Right.
But you're not thinking correct. But she's hyper focused on him. And it was just incredibly interesting. Everything, driving everybody crazy around her. She did not care how she was seen by anybody else but R.
Right.
I think the interesting thing about the way they portray R is that he's quite bland and like almost like a cipher, right? Like because she's like really obsessed with him, but he has almost zero personality in his film. I think purposely, obviously, because everything about him that she loves, she projected onto him. He's not actually doing any of that. So I think there's even this part that I find interesting where she sits in and then they're like doing like a performance and he is performing around these like mannequins and he's also like dressed like a mannequin in parts of it to like kind of imply that he is just like this static thing that like a mannequin's a static thing that you put clothes and accessories onto to create a persona. And that way he is the mannequin to her where she is like projecting and putting all these like qualities and like ideas about him. She's dressing him up in like, you know what I'm saying, like metaphorically to like be what she wants him to be. And then you know I love that kind of like iconography, like just like kind of, it's not like hidden, but I just found it interesting that they kind of play around with that.
Yeah, it's the perfect illustration of fame. You know, what is fame? You know, it's, you know, you can just take this blank slate and put whatever on there and produce something famous, you know.
So people that have long-term fame are the ones that constantly morph and change as artists, and I don't know how much of that is them and how much of that is a team of people behind them saying this is what we project is going to be interesting in the next 3 years, so we need to start pivoting into that. So you need to start changing the way you dress, you need to change the music you write, and you like star in these sorts of movies. I always go back to this. There's a reason why certain actors like go through a weird period of either being in rom-coms or being in action movies, right? Like, and they don't come from that background. If you had told me 25 years ago that Liam Neeson would be just like at this stage in his career just a guy who does action movies, I would have been like, that doesn't make, not Liam Neeson, but like, you know,
Dark Man would never do that to me.
He would never do that. But they go through that, and there's something that connects with an audience, and as a result, the people around them say that's what you need to do from now on because that's how you connect with your audience. The music of Germany in the 80s, of the new wave that he's doing just now, is pretty androgynous. It is like if you like read into articles on musicians of that era, they are kind of empty vessels, and that's, I think, like a genius level of marketing, because like you say, you can literally fill that with whatever you want it to be, and it connects it to you, makes it personal to you, makes you more interested, makes you want to spend more on it. And like you said, that mannequin scene is a great visualization of it. It's laid bare for the audience, whether or not you perceive it in the way I imagine the director intends it or not. It's put out there as a kind of, this set piece, it explains exactly what this person is, which doesn't surprise you at the end when he's prepared to be like, you know, I'm going, you know what, this guy R needs a vacation. Like R needs to go away for some me time. You know what I mean? Like when you finally see what his personality is in that break there, you realize that actually he is exactly what you expect a pop star that is prepared to sleep with an underage fan to be. Complete narcissist. So yeah,
no personality.
Really well
either. Not good and bad either.
Yeah, I know. Like,
and I do love that music video scene too, because it's just like right in the middle of the movie. Literally, it's the middle of the movie. They're just like, hey, why don't we just drop a full-length music video in here? It's just like, but it kind of works with the vibe of the movie. You know, it's, you know, at that point, you know, you're kind of seeing, you know, what he is as this sort of star. So 2 points I did want to bring up was, you know, well, maybe even more than two. One of the things you guys did mention was, kind of like the rise of celebrity with social media, like how different it is nowadays. There are like, I think it might have been on the clip of the Joe Rogan show, which I'm sure there's not really a lot of fans of necessarily watching this, but there was someone in there who, he was having a conversation with someone, and they were saying, the problem is you have millions of people that are listening to you multiple times a week for hours, and they think they know you. But the thing is, you don't know them at all. And I'm sure some of you guys, now I'm not, I don't do I basically do this podcast. But I don't have, a podcast of my own, or like, I'm on social media, but if people get on my nerves there, I'm just like, fuck off. But I've seen Michele, especially, I don't know if maybe it's more so because you're a woman, that people seem to interact with you more often, and it's to a condescending level. It's crazy the amount of things I'll see you post of people just sending you messages and stuff, just almost like starting arguments with you and things like that. And I'm like, that's so fucking weird. Like, who the hell do these people think they are to even send anything to anybody?
Yeah, I think part of it is maybe I'm a woman, but I think the other part of it is like my internet persona and my real persona are the same persona. I don't put on I'm not a character. Like some people, like I don't consider myself an influencer. If you're an influencer, usually you have a persona that you have to cultivate because you're trying to get advertisers to sponsor you and give you money. I don't do that. So my internet persona and my real persona are the same. So I think the way I interact with people, and I don't interact with them as they're like consuming me as a product. I interact with them as I'm Michele and I'm talking to Joe, or whoever, so I think I get parasocial relationships even more that way, to where people think they're entitled to my time. Sometimes I'll have people like DM me and they're upset because I didn't DM them back. Like, man, I got like a full-time job I'm working in. Or sometimes I just don't fucking feel like talking to somebody.
Right.
Like, you message me at 3 a.m, what's your top 100 movies? And then you get mad because I didn't answer you back. Like, I got a life, my guy,
Right.
My favorite.
And I have boundaries too. I have very strong boundaries, and I've made some enemies from that just because I don't like people talking to me a certain way. But I think now influencer culture, YouTubing, that kind of thing has blurred the line even more, because you can literally watch, there are people that stream hours a day, so you can literally spend 8 hours a day with somebody that you watch on
in
YouTube,
their house.
right?
Like,
you're
watching them at home, so
it feels very intimate to some people, and even I have, like, I'll catch myself, like, not like one to like stalk anybody or something, but just a YouTuber I feel like we have a lot of stuff in common, but I have to keep telling myself it's a persona that he is crafting to get me to subscribe to him and give him my money. So I think it's it's kind of ironic in the information age and the social media age that we're probably more isolated now than we were before. We're like in our own little bubble spaces trying to like connect to people, but it's all electronically. So what are we gonna do? So I think
you hit the nail on the head. Like, in the past, if someone, like in the case of this movie here, if she wants to contact him, she has to physically write a letter. She has to mail it. She has to go to the post office or whatnot, mail that letter for it to go away. If she wants to interact with him, she has to physically travel to see him. The internet, you can, and I've had this before where I put out an episode of something and I've like, oh, what's the name of that? In the record, what's the name of that movie the actor did in like 1983? And then 5 minutes later, I've remembered what the movie is and I've corrected myself, but I literally, like on like a YouTube video or in the episode, I'm getting people who reach that bit and without listening to the rest of the episode are commenting, I can't believe you didn't know this. Like, what sort of review are you that you can't remember this movie? And they're reacting to that like that, but they don't then correct it,
later.
5 minutes later. That's the statement that stands, which to me is a bit. It's just like you picked the most vulnerable version of myself in that point to make comment on, without making comment of any other time where I have maybe made a point which you may have agreed with, you've seen as valid. You picked the worst bit to, and it's toxic, but It's why I'm this year consciously trying to unpick myself from social media. So I'm deleting them one at a time, weaning myself off and deleting them one at a time because of that. Because it gets to a point where I don't want to wake up to 50 messages and like 100 notifications of people that I know for a fact if I don't at least thumbs up, I'm going to get some sort of, did you read my message? Did you?
Right.
Like, it's just it's insane. You were going to say something, Dave. Like you had this as well.
No, I relate to almost all that shit you guys
armpit
said.
gate.
Armpit
Yeah,
Dave,
armpit
right?
gate. Like, I know I wear the cutoff shirts, and I do wear them, because I'm like, that's just how I dress. But at the same time, I know it's been sexualized, so I'm going to play into it. Like, I wouldn't say that I'm 100% Mr. Parka and Dave are the same person. I would say that they're almost 100% the same. I would just say that Mr. Parka is a little bit nicer because I'm not always a nice person. You know what I mean? I work in a factory. I'm ADHD, so I can be aggressive. And I just also am, they make jokes. They say, what is it? Moots calls me Dr. Dave, Mr. Parka or something because I'm just snap like that. I'm like, okay. Then I'm like, all right, now leave me the fuck alone. Right. So like I get lots of strange people, and I've been doing this a long time too, like you guys. So it's just over sexualizing shit that's not people messaging you, because I used to be an actor too. So it's like I get it, but also like it's the weird sexualization that's just not acceptably, or people projecting shit on you. Where you're like, I don't know.
It's projection. It's 100% projection. It's how they see something that they're projecting out as your motivation for doing something when that's probably the last thing you were thinking about when you did it.
Yeah, I make tons of mistakes too during the video, but then 2 seconds later, I'm like, fuck. Like just this last week video, I didn't register Christina Rains was like in my head. And like, but you're also dealing with 10 movies in an hour with 40 fucking features, and you just watched all of them, and you're trying to recollect, because I don't take notes. Like I do that off the cuff. Yeah. And as I get older, the more and more mistakes. So you're like, fuck, you sound like an idiot sometimes. But everybody else wants to sit there and be like, oh yeah, this and this. It's like, yeah, but it's different. It's not you know what I mean? Like not everything is perfectly researched in this kind of way. You don't have the time to do that with everything, unfortunately. And that's just the way it's going to be. And that's kind of, but it's a strange, weird world. And there's a weird thing where people nowadays seem to want everyone to come to their aid, but don't give anyone else aid. Yeah. And then they wonder why they made themselves an island and wonder why no one's on.
Yeah. And that's where the interesting aspect of this movie lies, in that the actual idea of the obsessive, while this technology has made things more amenable or, easier to make comment, the actual psychological trait behind what Simone has rooted in her character is the same now. 40 years on, it's exactly the same. It hasn't changed. 40 years before that, it hadn't changed, and I would argue 100 years before that, it hadn't changed. Well, it's just something that's wired into us as human beings, and some people, the wiring goes one step further, where the leap is not a leap to them to things that we perceive as being irrational, unsafe specifically, and like downright dangerous. So
this movie did kind of come on the heels of two major pieces of celebrity obsession. You had John Hinckley shooting Ronald Reagan in order to impress Jodie Foster, which is a whole wild thing in itself.
She was not impressed, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Don't do that. If you're listening to this, don't try and assassinate a president thinking it'll, it will not get you what you think.
I mean,
Jodie Foster was like, eh.
She's like, I didn't want you to kill him, but you didn't even kill him. So it's not even that impressive. I mean, dude was fine.
Right. Try harder next time, okay? And then we had the murder of John Lennon by, was it Mark David Chapman? Is that his name? So yeah, I mean, those were two major pieces of obsession. Now they were both male aggressors. So, the idea of a female aggressor had kind of, cinematically, you can look back to something like Play Misty for Me was, a big predecessor to this. Clint Eastwood's Play Misty for Me.
And I'm sure Clint had that happen to him, honestly.
I'm sure, right. But that movie isn't necessarily from the female perspective. It's funny because before the 70s, it was kind of, the idea of like a female stalker to a male, most men would just be like, nah, whatever, no big deal. But it probably wasn't until, it's funny. I was talking to Nathaniel Thompson about this the other day, and he mentioned, it was kind of when the Manson family murders hit, that people kind of started seeing, the female presence as, this could be dangerous. Some of these chicks are crazy. So, I do think that moving into the 70s, with, like I said, Play Misty for me, the idea of a female aggressor, even though statistically most stalkers, I think it's like 85% of stalkers are male.
Yeah.
The idea that a female stalker did become sort of an idea that at least became somewhat ingrained in our consciousness.
But it went to the extreme. If you think about 87's Fatal Attraction, like the term bunny boiler is with us forever now,
right,
because of that movie, and the connotations and stereotypes that come from that are to the extreme. And then there's just a series of movies from 87 onwards where like Hand That Rocks the Cradle, in the early 90s, where we're just like,
Poison Ivy and
the
Crush, right? Yeah, the Crush, right? Yeah,
well, we also had Windows from 1980, 81 with the but it was a female stalking a female. So I think that was like a transition where people I could see that maybe, you know what I mean?
It goes to the Hollywood extreme version of it, which is why I like I said before, when I saw this, I enjoy the kind of the subtlety of how this builds. Some people will call it slow burn, and it is slow burn to an extent, but the subtlety of building the case, building it up level by level, and we go through all the interactions and the way she is as a character to that crescendo, to me, whilst it might not be overtly grotesque on camera, like in her head, it's the logical next step of what she's doing. The audience is on some level conditioned up to that point to kind of like weirdly accept that, like in her brain, the idea of, spoiler alert, murder and cannibalism is, like the murder doesn't satisfy, but the consummation of, like we've tried physical consummation and now we're going to try actual physical consummation as a way to feel closer to the person, and still empty at the end,
right? Even after she's become literally the ultimate consumer.
Yes.
And she's even got the Manson family girl look at the very end.
Yes,
right, with shaved head and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's weird is there's a nuance in here. At one point when she actually is in the sexual relationship, she's kind of, I want to say coarse, but she's not really gung-ho about it at first. She seems nervous and everything. So it's like somewhat, she's kind of a victim in herself. In that one aspect.
And she absolutely is, because she's underage and he's taking advantage of her.
100% taking advantage of her.
I think during the sex scene, she's disassociating because I almost want to think that, honestly, I don't think her obsession with him was necessarily sexual.
Yeah.
Like it had a sexual tinge to it a little bit probably, but not in a way that she was after him to sleep with him. She was after him because she loved everything he represented. He represented everything about herself that she couldn't like vocalize, or it wasn't sexual. Like if you like, even when
everything that isn't her dad. You look at her, like the way her dad acts, it's everything against her dad. You know what I mean? Like in a lot of respects, it's like our dad vehemently disapproves of him from what he's seen. So it's like almost like there's this rebellious level of that. Of like we all do it as teenagers. You rebel against the things your parents tell you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be listening to that. You shouldn't be into this. You shouldn't be doing that. So you instantly go to those things because it's your way of rebelling against it. And he horribly takes advantage of her. And like in a way where I don't feel that he's as sympathetic. I'm not saying I condone murder and cannibalism, but at the same time, I wasn't weeping for him. I was sad that his music wouldn't exist anymore, but then I can get the soundtrack. But like there's part of me that's like, it's that way where like she, well, I agree with you. I don't think she is mature enough to understand what a sexual relationship is, and as a result of that, she's in a different headspace when it happens, and then she feels that once she's went through it, there should be that deeper connection, and he's not got that. He's played her.
Yeah, for R, it's just a power trip.
100%.
Even those scenes when they are, about to get intimate, where he'll back up and she scoots herself towards him more. And then he backs up again, and she's scooting her naked body towards him again. For him, it's literally just a power trip. And listening to what his secretary said, you need to stop playing around with these little girls or whatever. It's readily apparent that this is just what he does. This is not the first time he's been bringing girls backstage or back to his place and doing this same exact thing. So to him, she's nothing.
I find it interesting too, the character of the secretary, who I kind of felt like maybe she had a little something with him, or had at some point. Yeah. And there's this idea that she doesn't try to really protect that girl too much, because when this happens a lot of times with women in I wouldn't almost say Hollywood, but just in general, sometimes if a woman is in a position of power because she's been given this power by appealing to men, or using sexuality, they want to protect their spot, but also they understand that they only keep their spot because they don't speak up. So she saw what he was going to do to her, and she could have maybe I think tried harder to separate them or warned her or something, but she doesn't, because she knows that in order for her to have her spot, she has to perpetuate the environment that cultivates that, I guess you could say. But I will say, this film, I do as a woman, it really does explore the idea of being men, and I don't know, so everybody's a guy, I'm not trying to be mean, but
please be mean.
But men exploiting women sexually for gain because it's a power, like you were saying, Bruce, it's a power play. He's in a position of power over her, and when there's even besides the age difference, there's a power imbalance as well. So there's two imbalances going on here, and I just feel like it's really tragic, that he takes advantage of her, because she kind of loves him in more of a pure kind of way. She's obviously messed up in the head, but he knows that she's obsessed, and he still has sex with her anyway. And then he acts surprised that she's clingy. He literally took her virginity also, which is a very, very special thing to a lot of people. It's your first time is the core memory that you get for your sex, right? And he took that away from her and then discarded her like she was nothing. He was you can stay in my mansion as long as you want, as if she was another object in his mansion and not a person, right? Also, earlier he was there's no food in the mansion, and he was oh, you can stay in my mansion. So she was maybe a little hangry, too.
Well, that's she basically didn't eat for 2 days, because she was in the cafeteria for half a second and got one.
Yeah.
Well, and
he was she's oh, there's food here, sir.
Right, and he wasn't wrong either, because when she does initially open his freezer, there's a bag of carrots in there, and not much else. It's a couple frozen vegetables.
It's actually a friend of his. It's a rich a couple or something, that it's American Friends mansion or something that they're renting. So nobody, they're going to be gone for months.
Right.
So nobody's going to find his ass. If there's any evidence in there, they would never even bother to look there. So she literally, it's a question. I don't know how long she was there.
Yeah, they kind of leave that ambiguous.
Did she eat them all and then grind up every single bone? So there's nothing left. You'd never find him.
It becomes an urban legend. What happened to the pop star R? He just disappeared. He just disappeared. It perpetuates that for forevermore. Right? Can I ask a question, Brett? I want interpretations, because I think someone at least at the beginning of this said unreliable witness and or unreliable narrator.
Yeah,
and I think I love movies that do that, where you're right, well, it could be this, but also we're seeing it from this person's perspective, so that's tailored as well, and we know that this person is imbalanced, so that once again colors the way we actually interpret what they do. Do we think she's pregnant at the end?
I do.
Yes.
Right. Cool. That's where I was leaning. So I just wanted to make sure it wasn't
it's just a circular story. I think it just has to be.
Right.
Cool.
I did recall there's a part later after she eats him where she spreads his ashes, perhaps, at the spot where she met him.
Grind up bones.
It was grind up bones. Okay.
Yeah, she grinds
more gross. So I don't think they actually will, I guess, find him.
She wipes it on her eye when she walks.
Right. Yeah. Got a little bone dust in the eye.
Is that what she would happen? Like that's the kind of funny thing, like where it's like a realistic, gross thing. Like, and those people are, what the fuck's she doing? She's just
standing there by the crowd.
Where she saw him, and she dumps where she met him for the first time, which is
and it's funny because she's surrounded by people like her, and it's she is.
I don't think anybody's quite like her.
Well,
not quite. One more thing I want to get to about the obsession, which I actually really like. There's a nuanced scene in there that's perfect. So every guy she comes in contact with is dog shit and predatory in a certain way. The guy who likes her is just a young kid. He's stupid. We don't know how bad he is. You know what I mean?
He gave her a mixtape.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
We don't know. He's fine. But the old man
What's on the
mixtape?
That you can be out there right now. That can be
the main guy, is the one fat guy that she meets.
He says, attempted rapist.
Yeah, he says, "You're a little minx, aren't you?" And then later, R says, "You're a little minx, aren't you?" And you can see her be like, just react a little bit, like, ugh. I think like deep down inside, she knows that this is not real. Like, not the feelings he has for her. There's something down there, like even when you're in delirious state, something's not right. And I think that right there, she's kind of like, it just rubbed her the wrong way, like he's not so different from all the other schlubby
from this other scumbag, right?
Yeah,
right.
So and that scene's really good when she's like traveling alone. You can tell she's dangerous. They set up that she can defend herself too.
Yeah.
No, but I thought that was a nice little touch. That I didn't hear anyone else really mention that the repeated dialogue from.
Well, it's funny because that's not in the English dub, so that's why I didn't mention it.
Minx is such a gross word.
It's a terrible word.
That's good. No.
I think this film does deal with repetition a lot, specifically in the score and the soundtrack, which I think, and the sound design, which is amazing. Yeah. But R's music, of course, has that new wave sound where it's like doonch, 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 but I feel like they use it a lot to reiterate how focused she is on him.
I agree.
Because her obsession with him is just this continuous beat, right? Continuously in her head. And then there are parts where they kind of take that music out, and there's this kind of weird breathing sound or a fan sound or something like that. It's just especially in the third act. Yeah. And it's just during the sex scene, pretty much from when the sex scene starts till after she's done eating him, there's that noise. It's just very unsettling. Her, and it's almost, I think it coincides with when her obsession with him stops. So does that music, right?
Yes.
And all that's left is the whooshing, maybe the blood rushing in her ears or something. She's finally kind of free of the hold he had over her, and she realizes that she's nothing to him. I really like the way that they used the soundtrack to kind of get you into her mind space.
100% what elevates the movie for me. On those viewings, I'm a big sound design guy and score. I love scores in movies. I think to me, a score can elevate a mediocre movie to greatness. It can also bury a movie which is incredibly acted. The script could be absolutely amazing. If the score and sound design is awful, then you've lost me. I'm afraid. In the case of this one, this is how I know I'm going to continue to revisit this movie and love it more and more. Because those triggers, those pointers, and the very nature, the director has something to say here with that, specifically about how we obsess. We've all been, I guarantee this, we've all been at some point, probably as a teenager, fixated on a song, and you've listened to it to the point where everyone is sick of it, and you should be sick of it as well. And eventually, you might get sick of it, where the lust for the band is gone, or your musical taste changes or whatnot. But you will listen to it on, and if you hear it as an adult, instantly you're transported back to its feelings, smells, everything just goes right back to that point. It's a connective thing. It just ties into your brain. The fact that when the fantasy is broken for her, that idea of the soundtrack of her life being the soundtrack of the music that he makes is then gone at that point, is so well done in the movie. It's not even abruptly done. It's just this transition into the next phase of her as a character that, as someone that loves art house horror, I was just this is fucking awesome. It's just so good. It just made me smile. And And it goes to show, like some people will watch a movie like this and say it's too slow, or some people will be like, nothing happens, or it's too schlocky, and it goes for like extremity at the end without creating a point. And what I see here is a very deft director, like delivering a story with points not only in the characters and the and the composition of the music, but the sound design as well is intrinsically linked to her perception. So it's not just the inner monologue, but everything that goes along that the listener or viewer is experiencing is linked in with how she feels in that moment. And that's just really well done. It's just really, really smartly captured.
Well, and it's she's always wearing the headphones. So it's almost like, his music, the soundtrack to this movie is also the soundtrack to her life, that she's living. And I have seen some reviews of this movie that complain that, the music's too repetitive. But I don't feel that at all. I feel like it really adds to sort of this hypnotic, disjointed sort of like, ambiance that this film has, and like I said earlier, if you can get into this vibe, you're all in. And I think the soundtrack is a big part of that. And I never once got sick of the score. You kind of, if anything, you kind of become accustomed to it. And when it's not there, it's almost more jarring than when it is there. So something else that you guys mentioned was, how ultimately consuming him was sort of the end of that phase of her life, that's that sort of obsession she had with him. But I actually think the next phase of her life is actually even more chilling, because as she's sort of again giving these monologues to her unborn child, like, it's her saying, it didn't work out. My previous fantasy didn't work out, but this next one, we're going to be something special, which makes you wonder just how fucking crazy that's going to be. It's really kind of a chilling coda to the everything that had come before.
I think we should talk about Désirée is it Nosbusch or Nosbusch?
Nosbusch.
Nosbusch. Okay.
Nosbusch, maybe.
Nosbusch. Yeah.
Which I always was wondering if I was pronouncing it wrong. But then I actually looked up some YouTube interviews with her, and it's Nosbusch, like Nosbusch.
I'm glad I'm not the only person that does that. I'm just like, can I just hear somebody say something?
Somebody who speaks English say it, not a German or other language. They say it so fast, you're like, what was that?
I know, you're like rewinding it,
But she's fantastic in this, man.
Yeah,
and
she's
as
really
the director
good.
said
Really good.
he can't see any other actors but her. So after her working with her, he's obsessed with her as an actor.
And it's strange because the reviews at the time, the German reviews at the time, really shit on her. They were saying, she was really just kind of like bland in it, and she didn't really bring much to the table. And I don't know if that was sort of a well, I guess we got to get into her anyway. But like at the time, she was actually she originally in her early teens, or even before her teens, I think like when she was 12, she got involved in like radio broadcasting. She was the host of, a couple German radio shows. And then she moved into she was a teen host for like, not only like interview shows, but mostly like sort of like Top of the Pops sort of music shows for German television. So she was kind of known as being, a presenter on these shows. That's what her main claim to fame was at the time. So this movie was almost seen as like weirdly reactionary to like a lot of the stuff that she was actually promoting.
But she was the one people were obsessed with. It was the opposite.
Right. And it's funny because in the movie, like a lot of these hosts of the television shows that you see in the movie were actually real life German presenters. They were actually real life German TV stars and stuff that were known for those sort of things that, I guess Eckhart Schmidt knew them. But weirdly enough, so before this movie started, she was involved with her manager. And she was, apparently she got involved with him when she was age 16 and he was 42. Now, I had read some reports that he was actually he divorced his wife to live with her. And I saw something else that said she was actually his foster daughter at the time, which just adds a whole different layer of creepy to like this whole thing. And apparently the relationship was pretty abusive, and she did, eventually get out of it. But I feel like he kind of oversaw a lot of things in her career that were a little iffy. I mean, obviously their whole relationship was a little
He
iffy
signed
in
the
first
consent
place.
form for this movie to
Right,
be made
right.
and all that
Because
stuff.
she
He
was
signed off on it.
17 at the time that she made this, right? 17.
Yeah,
The
17,
parents
yeah.
did sign it. He signed it.
He signed
which is
it,
what
right.
came up to the whole controversy later on. I guess we can talk about after we get through Désirée. But the one thing she was on a talk show, which is kind of little. She's no stranger to controversy. I guess the story goes somewhat. It's kind of hard through the translation. Somebody at Parliament was complaining about people not getting jobs because they're heavy, or they shouldn't get a job just because they're heavy. And she said, "I don't know why. You're fat. You should. Why does it matter to you? You're fat too." Or something
Right.
like that, kind of insulting them for putting
Yeah.
up that thing, and she got in a lot of trouble. She got death threats and everything like that. So,
Well, and I think she got booted from the show, maybe,
Yeah.
or from
Yeah.
maybe
She got-
even the TV station or something.
so I mean, she was an
Um,
actress before this, and she had a career that went on later. She ended up being a director and went to LA, and she's just always stayed in the spotlight, working in art and all. The trifecta of all three of the main people involved with this movie, all had a music background, and so it's kind of a perfect marriage of the three coming together to make this.
Yeah, and she, like you said, she had a big career after this. She not only in television but in films. If you look on YouTube, you can find like German American Express commercials with her on it. Just from a couple years later. So yeah, she's remained, at least in Germany, in the public eye. Although I don't know, I guess she used a different name over here for like she was doing some singing and stuff, but I have not delved into that aspect of her career.
I searched a little, but I couldn't really find. I was trying to find her singing some songs, but I just couldn't see it. I didn't have time, and I couldn't find it.
But yeah, she's really good in this movie, I think. I think she really does a great job of playing out, this sort of girl who's detached from reality. So I'm kind of shocked to find that, the reviews at the time were negative towards her choices here.
They also hated The Thing, so what the fuck do they know? Like they hate everything good, and then they're like, and they're scared to say, you know what? I fucked up. If I hate something, I come back and I love it. I'm like, I was totally wrong about that.
In today's world, what you do is you say all that. It's time to reevaluate, which is a very nice way of saying I got it wrong.
Or you can double down. Never
Right.
admit defeat. Never admit you're wrong, and then just like carry out the
No
line
retreat,
for
no
the rest of your
surrender. I
life.
love it.
So Désirée also, I mean, she had kind of a falling out with the director after the film was released. So there's sort of two sides to the story. There's his side. I'll let you tell his side, Dave. But so her side was that she claims that the director agreed to allow her to look at the editing of the sex scene to see if she had any objections to it before it was released. And apparently that did not happen. So she actually brought a lawsuit against the film, trying to, I don't know if just to stop it from getting released or trying to get it edited somehow differently. Now, the director's claims on that are a little different, but it has the same end result. I don't know if you want to get into that, Dave.
Yeah, he mentioned that he let her look at all the storyboards. If you watch the special features, we went over the storyboards. We went through absolutely everything. She signed off on it. We filmed it. And then when it came through, she was upset about two distinct scenes where she's dragging the body. And then when he puts the hand down the pants, which aren't even the most explicit, but
No.
she wanted those cut. But the problem was he refused that, of course. And then they realized that the contract was all bullshit because she can't sign off on it. Her manager, boyfriend, agent shouldn't have signed off on it because he had no power. It should have been the parents, and they never did. So they just paid her to kind of go away. But also, I remember Michele had mentioned that there were stills being used that upset her. And I didn't read any of that. I didn't see any of that.
Yeah, that was just me looking around on the internet, and like, they just said there were some stills that she didn't like, and I guess it was probably they might have been stills from those scenes you mentioned, honestly. Now that you say
promotional
that.
material that bothered her.
Promotional material, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
But I think it kind of fits thematically into the film as well. It's kind of like a weird sort of meta thing, right? Because, she's in the movie, she's 16. In real life, she's 17. And in real life, she's doing the same thing that her character is doing, which is like getting involved with a much older man that has power over her. And that's, her agent obviously is another version of that. It's just weird how real life and films kind of intersect like that, right? Because art's always, when people make art, they don't make it in a vacuum, right? So it just kind of like when people say, this thing isn't political. All art is political because when you make art, you're making it within the environment that you're existing in, which is political in it of itself. But I just find it's like this interesting parallel between her character and her real life persona. They're both being kind of like taken advantage of by older men, which happens all the time.
Right.
Yes,
I was going to say, if
it happens the other way around too, but it's more so men taking advantage of younger women. I don't want to say that the other way doesn't happen because somebody's going to be like, well, there's one time.
You got to push up your glasses.
Actually, I was going to say, if you look at things just now, the one of the big controversies that exists in 2025 is the idea that if you act in a movie or you portray a character in a movie, your likeness is then owned by a studio which, using artificial intelligence, deepfake technology, can in perpetuity just sell that. And well, as you can imagine, there's that I didn't sign on for that because that technology didn't exist then, or I never thought of that, or it never came up. But when you sign a contract, they're written in such a way where it's very, very common that the studio wins and the artist doesn't. Or even if the studio loses, the resources are such there that they can make it go away by paying off. But it still exists as a thing. It's just changed again. So the idea of, like, we're seeing it more and more now, where people are saying, well, they can't use my voice on that, or they can't put my likeness on that. And well, actually, you've signed it away when you signed your contract. And that's the way it exists now. So once again, it's great to see that things, as advanced as we are with the technology we have and the maturity we've achieved, we are no better than we were 40 years ago. And like I said, 100 years before that, and 200 before that, we're exactly the same. It's just the technology's made it such that we can do pretty much whatever we want now. People can go in and edit blemishes, remove pounds from people in photographs, and it doesn't bear a resemblance to the original photograph that was taken, but you signed off on it, the photo was taken, and how the ad campaign goes ahead to use it is really up to them because they own your likeness, which is terrifying. So one more thing I do want to mention about the creepy manager before I forget. So apparently he was actually the radio producer for children's programming. Oh, Jesus.
At one of the stations that she worked at.
Why is it so correct? It just seems so right.
He was let go from his job after he divorced his wife to shack up with her.
It's just America.
And then do you want to mention and then just more sadness to her story. So apparently also in 1982, the year that this came out, she was actually kind of almost held captive by Klaus Kinski.
Why does he pop up everywhere?
Right.
She's a real life vampire.
And he pops up.
Real life vampire Klaus Kinski. That's how we should introduce him from now on.
She went to his house for some sort of interview thing, and he basically sort of kept her captive there. She eventually had to sneak out a window and run away to get away from him for all this stuff, which is just another bizarre chapter of her life. The same year that came out. Do we want to talk about Bodo Staiger, R, in the movie anymore?
Briefly mentioned
besides him being in Rheingold, he did stay active in the music industry. He became a producer. He was involved in several side projects with people from Kraftwerk, which makes sense given his musical background. I guess he was seen as kind of one of the front runners of this sort of German new wave. This sort of I don't know, Michele would probably be a better this is probably a little bit more in her area of expertise, but I would almost say proto-industrial sort of stuff, like Einstein Neubauten and things like that.
Did he ever do any more movies? I didn't really look up if he was in any other stuff.
He wasn't an actor. So I don't know if he actually acted in anything else. I know he scored one other German movie, but I can't remember the title offhand. I probably should have jotted that down in my notes, but I didn't. So, I don't know if he was in any other movies or not. Dave, do you know? Or
I'm not so sure, but I know he got his start early, like in his 20s. So this dude was making music for a very long time, and I do know that he shifted and he was like producing music in like, I think it was like Ghana, which is really bizarre. Like it's almost like a kind of thing. And when he died in 2019, I guess he got a bunch of tributes. So I guess he had produced music and was pretty popular there. And this is from another podcast. I'm going to credit it. I think it's like Girls School podcast. And I listened to that. That's the only information like that was not anywhere else, was her breaking down his kind of life and stuff. And it was a really good podcast. You should give that a listen to as well.
Yeah.
Listening
on IMDb, which like take that with a pinch of salt, he only has one acting credit and it's
okay. Perfect.
I do want to talk about the director's other movies before we get out of here. Just a couple that are kind of related to this film.
Well, and I have some stories about the producer as well.
Okay.
And Eckhart Schmidt. Unfortunately, he just passed away. The director just passed away in October. Yeah.
24th, 2024.
Something like that. Yeah.
7 days before his birthday.
No, bummer. But anyway, get into his other movies because I haven't watched his other movies.
Yeah, he had there's a couple other ones that you mentioned, Alpha City, which I didn't get a chance to watch, but I feel like these three are supposedly like a loose trilogy, and I had watched one called Loft for 1985, which is like an art loft, and this other one called Gold of Love from 83, which is the year after, and the quality of this print was really bad, and it's very short. It's like 83 minutes. It's very art film. And
it's another it's kind of like a punk film too, though, right?
Yeah,
like
it's very punk
it's
art.
Members of another band, I think.
It's like a mixture of Durfan and Loft. So it's like in the middle of them, but it's my least favorite of the three. Okay. And that's probably due to quality, but it's bizarre. It's dreamlike. In the beginning, she's crying tears of blood, and she goes in to see this band, and she witnesses something she shouldn't. There's like a group of kind of wild kind of punks after her, and it looks really cool. It's very artistic, and I think it's a little just, you know how that fine line between art and bullshit is really kind of, and it just didn't grasp me enough. It's a very visual story, so at the same time, if the quality's bad and it's a visual story, you're like, well, I'm not giving this a fair shake because I can't see shit.
Right.
And that was 83. Interesting enough, and the music originally he couldn't. It was kind of this deal where he wanted to use certain bands and certain music and record these things, but it was not. He couldn't use it, so it suffered from that as well. So they'll cut to like a band on the stage for like 2 minutes, and you're like, it's just like noise. And you're like, okay, and it comes across as more like artsy bullshit, which I love artsy bullshit, but there's a fine line. Like I said, sometimes artsy bullshit's wonderful, sometimes it is just bullshit.
Right.
Yeah. So and the next one is and it's funny because you're like, when you watch Durfan and Gold of Love and Loft, you're like, this is made by a guy in his 20s. This motherfucker was in his 40s by this time. And you're like, that is impressive because this guy has a young man's eye. And then of course he had his heart, he has obviously his pulse right on the music scene and stuff. Loft 85. Have you seen this one, Bruce? You would really like this movie. This is like the German, somewhat post-apocalyptic house on the edge of the park here with the class politics. So these kind of rich couple, this rich guy and his girlfriend. She's not rich, but he's rich, and his father had made money from really shitty ways, and it seems that there's been some sort of apocalyptic kind of war. So the world's a shitty trash heap, and there's still punks, of course, you know, like there should be, kind of these new wave punk deals. And they go to this loft, and they mention that there's something that people would just go to the art scene, which he's very much involved with, and kind of laugh at the stuff. They don't go to look at the art. They make fun of it. They drink. They hang out. They don't give a shit about the art. And he does that. These punks that have actually made the art kind of hyper focused. They're in this like small gang clique, and they kind of torture them and attack them until they have to fight back and survive. There's a lot of like class politics and arguments. It's beautiful. It's lit great and shot great. And it's got really cool music, and it's like German like young people, so they're all like really fucking good looking, and it's a good film. It's disturbing though too at points, but I really like this one. It was a rewatch for me. I did watch it for 85, and I had seen Durfan before Loft, but watching it I was like, oh, that's interesting. He made a couple. So this guy has a slew of movies, more thrillers and stuff like that, and then he made tons of documentaries. The guy's made dozens and dozens of documentaries, starting with like 1980. If you look at his list, it goes all the way up to like 2018. So I mean, the guy's very prolific, and I think probably more popular. Maybe respected, not popular. Durfan did well and it was popular, but respected probably for his documentaries in Germany from just glimpses at it.
So one of the weird things that I never picked up on in this film until watching the interview with Eckhart Schmidt that's on the Blu-ray is them talking about, you know, basically he was saying how he tried to also work in some parallels to fascism in Germany at the time. And like, so even during the opening of the film, when you're hearing like the crowd roar for R, like he had mixed in a bunch of Heils from like old Hitler rallies into this. And he started, he hit other things like the symbol for R's album, how it kind of like almost looks like an SS. That's like on her backpack.
I had wondered that when I saw it, because like instantly there's a lot of that, like of that time frame specifically in the kind of new wave punk scene in Germany. There's a lot of that symbolism that works its way through, because punk by its nature being against the grain will co-opt things, but change things around. Well, the smart ones change things around, the dumb ones just use those symbols like just straight away.
It's also go ahead.
I was going to say, but even the way he dresses specifically, leans towards a particular style of uniform, which is not too dissimilar.
Yeah. And they mentioned that like with the scene where the music video, you know, his apparel in that, they said was, you know, sort of like Nazi officer influenced. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, I think you watched the interview too. But I think that he said that essentially he was trying to like draw some parallels between, you know, R as like sort of like a fascist leader, and make you wonder whether, you know, is it the leader that seduced the people?
That's his best line in it.
Or
are they looking for the leader?
Right. Or are the people looking for the leader?
Did we summon the leader? Like in the term, was Hitler just a vessel for their hate? Or was Hitler the one who made them hate? Was the hate there, and he was just the vessel to it? And he's saying that, and I'm like, it's projection, that she's projecting all this shit on him. And I honestly, unfortunately, do think that people have the hate, and they put it into somebody, and that person takes off with it. Brings it all together. You know, that's just kind of...
And that idea is unfortunately very prescient, especially for our current political situation here.
I'll probably lose some subscribers, but good riddance. Good riddance. But
something happening in America right now.
No, don't worry about it. You just don't worry your pretty little head. You'll be fine. You got good health care. You'll be all right.
Duncan, you're about to have 3 new roommates.
I'll bring my collection though. We'll have a good time.
Right? Yeah.
You don't have room for all our combined collection.
I'm telling you.
Your wife would be like, "Can we at least throw out the 3 copies of Ghoulies 2?"
100%.
We don't need 3 copies of
100%.
But
nuance.
The one thing what was I thinking? I was like slipping. Like, you know, the ultimate like act of the punks is like their grandfathers were probably Nazis, so their fathers and mothers didn't want nothing to do with that shit because it was, you know. And then they find this shit and it's this act of defiance. Like, look at Grandpa's old outfits, you know what I mean? Or look what my dad brought home, this gun that he put off a Nazi or this thing, and as like kind of a souvenir because he killed him.
It goes in cycles. It does. Like, if you look at the,
it's offensive. They want to be offensive. They want to have that ultimate rebellion. But you know,
well, like the 60s are full of people that are, you know, free love, free drugs and whatnot, and then you get, by the time the mid 70s come down, things start getting very conservative. Like, it's the backlash to whatever your parents do, you rebel against it. Like I mentioned earlier on, Simone is like rebelling against her dad that likes Western movies. Like, he's like, look how dated he is. He watches Western movies. When I want to watch
her parents are garbage in here. The complete. We didn't call the cops or anybody.
Right.
So it's like
didn't want a scandal, right?
Yeah, she just comes back and they're like, "Oh, you're back." So I guess it's okay. I was like, she's like bald now.
Right.
She's like
ask a couple of questions.
Mind too. She's like,
I think there's I like that you bring up the fascism angle, because if you look at it in that way, then Simone is the youth being
corrupted
by fascism. But then when they finally entrench themselves in the fascism, they discover that fascism it destroys everyone, even the
Yeah.
people that are part of the ideology. We're all destroyed, because that's the only way fascism can exist, is by subjugation, right? So like when she finally embraces fascism uses her body for its own gain and then tosses her aside, because that's what it does. So that's like a really cool, angle to come at this film from too. That's really interesting.
If you've got a vessel that you're projecting all your
Everything
hate into, as soon as they say as soon as they say something that doesn't 100%, and this is linking back to the current state we are in just now, when that person says that one thing that is not exactly the reason that you put your faith in them, that's when the disconnect happens. It's where the dream is shattered of your belief in that person. I can't believe, how can they think that they believe this? And they might not necessarily believe that. It's a projection of you into them that has made you feel that way. So once again, I think this, it's weird how like on the nose this movie is with a lot of that messaging. And
she shaves her head at the end like a skinhead.
Right.
Yes.
Or like a Manson girl, who's also been indoctrinated to that bullshit that Manson used to sell. So it's funny. It's like you go and you put all this projection on someone, and then when you finally get to meet your so-called love or your hero or anything, all that's behind them is just a limp dick, a lame fuck, and a dull personality.
Yeah. Which is the name of my autobiography coming next year.
I don't think my personality is dull. I may be a lame fuck, but yeah, this is a good film, and it's also one of those ones that's fun to talk about. Some great movies, you go to talk about them, you're like, it's good. I like when Jason stabs that person.
I also like that it's not over. It's not. We mentioned this before. It's not over talked, so you don't have like a plethora of people out there already banging the drum, like covering every aspect of the movie to the point that the oxygen's kind of gone for discussion. In the case of this one, I had, like I said before, I had literally never heard of this before until Dave mentioned it, and on the fact that I know that at times he has questionable movie taste, but for the most part, when it comes to discussing
Ghoulies 2, Ghoulies 3, 5 stars.
when it comes to discussing movies in the past, anything that we've discussed together tends to have an angle that at least one of us is like very interesting to parse out. And like I said, within like the first 5 minutes of this movie, I was like, oh yeah, this has me. I'm ready to be absorbed by this. And then the second viewing, I enjoyed it more than the first viewing. So much so that I am eagerly tracking down a copy of the Blu-ray to own, which I'll import. But hopefully one of the boutique labels over here. When I think of how many movies have been released on 88 films in the UK that are utter trash, which I own.
We're talking about best slasher collection of all time.
I will support that label and I will buy things from it, right? But some of those movies are utter trash, and movies like this exist that are not that can be scanned because they've been scanned elsewhere that are just not available in the UK. I'll be honest, I'm surprised this movie, probably because it didn't get like a prominent release over here. This is prime fodder for video nasties. Like you've got like underage sex and cannibalism at the end of the movie. That movie's on the banned list. Like the fact that it doesn't appear there at all, so it never even got the notoriety, which means it probably never had that VHS run in the UK to get that notoriety. Just goes to speak of, I think it's a blind spot for specifically over here. But it was a blind spot for me, and I'm glad that it isn't now. It's genuinely one of these ones that's made me giddy to finally have seen. Yeah, I thought it was really, really, really good.
So I guess in the spirit of talking about trying to get this movie seen, so appropriately, after I saw the movie on VHS in the late 90s, I was completely obsessed with it. I thought it was fucking great. And like I would have movie nights and show it to friends. Everybody that ever saw it would just be blown away by it. So when the DVD revolution kind of hit in the early 2000s, I was like, oh, I need to get Trance on DVD, over here real badly. So I actually got in touch with Martin Moszkowicz, who was one of the producers of the movie. And at this point in time, he was one of the bigwigs over at Constantine Film in Germany, which is like one of probably Germany's biggest studio, really. And he had produced, he's one of the producers on like the Resident Evil movies. He was one of the people that brought those into fruition. He did a really cool movie I like called Perfume: The Story of a Murderer.
I love
that movie.
That
That's another movie that has a ending where similar to this movie.
Yeah,
I have a little tiny funny story about that. I watched that with my boyfriend, and I'd seen it before, and he fell asleep like halfway through, and then he woke up and he was like, "Oh, what happened in the end?" And I told him, and he thought I was fucking making it up. I was like, "No, it seriously happened."
This really happened.
Right? Yeah. Everybody got high on scents, and then there's an orgy, and then like what? But yeah, so he was one of the guys that was behind that. But he was, this was one of his earliest films. And like he had worked with Eckhart Schmidt on several other films after this, including I think City of Gold, and Alpha City and stuff like that. So I got in touch with him, and he's like, "Yes, I own the U.S. rights to this movie." I said, "Well, great. I'll put you in contact with some companies, and I would love to see this come out." So the first people I had in mind were Mondo Macabro, because I figured it's a German movie. It's kind of weird European movie. I said it seems like it'd be perfectly up their alley. So I sent Pete Toombs the info. I was like, "Hey, I don't know if you've seen this movie before, but it's fucking amazing, and you need to check it out. And here's the rights holder. Like, I don't know how much he wants. I don't know. Like, that's your stuff to deal with. I'm just doing what I can." And after a while, I heard didn't hear anything, and it seemed like it wasn't coming out. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe Severin Films would want to do it. So I sent David Gregory a copy of the movie. I was like, "Hey, watch this. This movie's fucking great. Here's the rights holder. I'd love to see this come out from your label. Try to do something with it." And I don't even know that David ever even watched the fucking movie. So after a while, I got bored with him, and I'm like, okay, well, let me try Synapse. So I sent a copy over to Don and Jerry. I'm like, "Hey, here's this guy. This movie's awesome. Give it a look," or whatever. So like a few weeks later, Jerry from Synapse calls. He's like, "Who the fuck is this Martin Moszkowicz guy that he keeps calling me?" He says, like, "I'm talking to this guy, and he's like wanting like spreadsheets of sales projections and like all this like crazy shit." Like, because I guess, the guy's in the studio business, he's running, one of Germany's big things. So like, I think he's trying to treat Trance or Der Fan like it's Resident Evil or something. So he's trying to like get like all these crazy deals. So basically after that, I was like, well, I guess Martin kind of has like these, this sort of out of reality thoughts about this movie and what it's worth. I was like, well, I guess that's going to be that, and that's probably why this movie never even got a U.S. release in the first place. And then literally it was like 8 years after that, Mondo Macabro finally announced that they were putting it on Blu-ray. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So I went back and checked my email. It was literally 10 years after I had sent them 10 years after I had sent them the information for the rights holder that they finally announced it for Blu-ray. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And Pete, but that's one of the things about Pete Toombs and Andy Stark over there. Although I don't know how much work Andy still does with him now that he's like big time producer. But they will go the extra, like, a lot of times dealing with like some of these crazy companies in the farthest reaches of the globe. Sometimes these things take time. Yeah. Look at Hungry Snake Woman. They were trying to work with, Sorora Intersine for like decades. They did Lady Terminator, and
why didn't they get us part 1 and 2 of the Snake Woman trilogy? I've seen 1, I didn't see 2, so literally 3.
So Snake Queen, funny enough, Snake Queen was one that they were originally going to do on DVD from Rappy Films, but unfortunately when they opened the cans of negative, the entire negative had like fused itself together.
Part 1 from 82.
Yeah, so apparently
3's
that
the best
was
one. 3's way better than 1.
Is 3 Hungry Snake Woman?
Yeah, 3's awesome.
Hungry Snake Woman's fucking amazing.
Dracula's back and he ate her tits.
And he ate her tits.
Some shit like that. I was just like,
yeah.
I laughed out loud. It was
funny. Me too. Yeah, movie's bonkers. My other favorite part of that movie is when they're like like having that seance, and they're like, or whatever it is, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna have to summon the Snake Woman." They're like, "Okay," and the guy just looks up, and like you think he's gonna chant some spell or something. He just looks up, he goes, "Snake Woman."
No, it's funny because like
I lost it.
Like he's like out there trying to find Snake Woman, and it's like you have to suck the blood of 3 women and cut off their tits or something. I'm like, that's very, very descriptive, and especially for an Indonesian movie, like that's not typical. I watch so many of them, and they're not like that usually, not that gratuitous and sexual violence. And then he's like, then he's dressed up as Dracula. I'm like, why is he a Dracula? Like,
Right.
he's literally in the
because
outfit
he
for
is,
everything.
right? Yeah, Hungry Snake Woman is definitely top tier Indonesian stuff.
Right behind Queen of Black Magic and Miss Six and Bali.
Right. But yeah, that's one of the things I love about Mondo Macabro is their perseverance. The fact that if they want a title, they're gonna keep trying at it year after year, and eventually, hopefully they nail them. And this one they did. So yeah, hats off to Pete.
There's a fantastic interview that probably came out when this Blu-ray came out on Screamcast, which is a podcast that no longer exists, where they interview Pete Toombs about this movie, and it's a really nice interview. They talk about the movie and whatnot. It's Brad Henderson, and I can't remember the other host. He was a really nice guy, Sean. But Brad Henderson went on to work at TerrorVision and stuff like that. So
he was a producer of Vinegar Syndrome for a while. Now he's one of the main guys at TerrorVision. Right.
I just worked with them for the first time on a film that's coming out, Gushing Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like a art house Pinku film.
Right.
But yeah, they were really cool to work for. Very nice.
I don't know him personally, but I have friends with him on Facebook, and he always had really interesting taste. And I always liked listening to him talk on his podcast. He seemed like a cool guy. We have anything else we want to talk about? The fan?
Not. I think that covered most of my shitty notes. Yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, we've said a lot.
Just can basically mention how great the soundtrack is. Listen to it on YouTube.
Oh, so good.
I like the one song that's like a moment, and like it's in German, but it's like it's just to live in a moment. Like I like that one a lot, but there's one that is literally stuck in my head. It's like and I was just literally in my head for like 3 days. I'm just like working like
right.
like fucking up.
Yeah, and I do love. I do like how Michelle had mentioned earlier. As the movie gets more darker and ominous, the music becomes a bit more dark and ominous as well. So yeah, I do really think that its score is one of the main components that really makes this such a great movie. And yeah, I mean it's just this whole sort of like I love the idea that unlike a lot of these other stalker and obsession movies, we are totally in her perspective, even to the point where we're seeing some of her fantasies, about, she's sitting there trying to think, well, maybe he didn't get my letters because, the woman's telling her to take them into the trash. And, she's, visualizing, all these, reasons why her, he's not getting back to her, and, it's never just because, he wouldn't, because, like Duncan said, if only I could talk to them the one time, they would love me. And, it's that sort of mentality.
They're going to think I'm so funny if they get in front, like a king of comedy, right? He's like, just let me get up there and I'll be great. He's fucking,
exactly.
It's like, you're mediocre at best in king of comedy as like a comedian. But, no, so I think before we go, we should just mention one movie that we can recommend in line with Durfan. Like,
oh, Jesus.
You think just one. Just
are there other movies like this?
I'll throw mine out.
I would pick Audition.
Yeah, there we go. Mine's The
that.
Angel Guts from '81. I think has some similarities, and Audition's great. So, Duncan?
I mentioned it earlier on, and not because it even has anything similar at all, but the idea of that motif musically, the cinematography, and just because I absolutely love it. White of the Eye. I would definitely say check that out.
Donald Cammell.
Yeah,
he had a tragic end too.
He did, yes, very tragic. Great filmmaker as well, like absolutely phenomenal filmmaker. But
well, and I mean, he had a weird career too. I mean, he was in Kenneth Anger films, some of Kenneth Anger shorts and stuff like that. Yeah, so he was kind of an interesting guy. And I mean, Way of the Eye is really an interesting film. I mean, it's really a bizarre one.
It's out there, and I kind of love it. I also only watch it nowadays, twinned with Tenebrae, because that's how my brain links things for no other reason than.
Well, and didn't he co-direct Performance with Nicholas Roeg as well?
Right.
Yeah. Performance is out of control. He's so goddamn good.
Like, a lot of drugs. That's what I think. So yeah, that's the one I would mention.
So funny, quick Audition story. So I actually saw Audition in theaters when Tartan released it in theaters over here, and at that time, Takashi Miike wasn't really nobody really knew Takashi Miike at the time. I mean, Audition was kind of the movie that put him on the map. So all that I knew him from at the time was Fudo, all about these, schoolgirl Yakuza assassins, these school kid assassins. And I thought that was a fun, trashy, weird movie. I had a VHS copy of that. So I'm like, oh, it's a new Japanese horror movie by the director of Fudo is playing, playing the Charles. So I got like this group of people together. And like my one buddy Dave had like some friends of his in from out of town who weren't even like really horror movie people, but they're like, well, this is what we're doing. So, we went and saw Audition, and that movie fucking floored us. Yeah. And that jump scare in that movie, like literally is one of the greatest jump scares I've ever seen in my entire life. That almost knocked me out of my theater seat at the time. But yeah, it was so weird just kind of like seeing this movie unfold, and like immediately as you're watching it, you recognize that movie as a classic, which doesn't always happen. You don't necessarily 100% always realize greatness when you're like watching it for the first time. But this one watching, I'm like, wow, this is really something special. And then, I was not surprised at all to see that one really blow up from there. And Mike blow up for better or worse. He might be a little maybe a little too prolific for his own good, but whatever.
150 movies later, he's like,
right.
Hey man.
I like almost everything I've seen by him, even stuff like Terraformers. People are like, it's terrible. I'm like, it's all right. Like, I'm not familiar with the source material, so it's all right.
Yeah, you can tell the movies that he's really passionate about and the ones that he's really happy he got paid for.
Right.
My questionable taste is my favorite's Visitor Q. So right then, I have I'm just a sick person. I'm just a sick man. But do you have a pick, Bruce?
Me? No, I don't. I'll piggyback everybody else's picks.
All right.
How's that sound? How's that sound for a cop out?
Sounds like bullshit, but sounds like a fine line between art and bullshit. But Michelle,
let me see what I have in my stack right here. Right. Well, we got Elvis movies.
Only
more Elvis.
You got the one where he's a boxer, or the Western one where the guy throws the sticks of dynamite?
We do have the boxer one. I don't know if we have the
King Galahad. What is it? It's like
is it King Galahad or Kid Galahad or Kid Creole? One of those. I can't remember which.
Yeah, it's the Galahad one. Yeah, that was a fun movie. Even though it's complete reverse role. Like Charles Bronson is the coach and Elvis is the hard boxer.
The fighter.
Switch that role. Bronson's the fighter. Elvis is the talking guy. Like, what are we doing?
Too funny.
So yeah, do you have any plugs, Michelle?
Can you guys hear me? Because my AirPods kind of died.
Yes, you're coming through fine.
While this was happening, they were like, "Boo!" I was like, "No." Not really. I guess, like I said, just coming out now is that BFI release for Chronos. I was really proud of that essay. I worked pretty hard on it. Also, it was the first time I got to write for BFI. I was really excited about that.
They put out really good stuff over here.
One for Cusseau, for Vinegar Syndrome. I did an essay for that. A Flying Lotus film. It's like the grossest, nastiest film, full of pus and semen and cum and buttholes and just like every single feces, abortions. It has everything you could possibly think of that's disgusting in it, and it's amazing. And I think, if you're into something that sounds like that, you should pick that up from Vinegar Syndrome.
Duncan?
The podcast Under the Stairs still going in its 11th year. I think 1,400 episodes. So like some silly number like that. Intermittently at the moment because my work is kicking my ass at the moment. So
I feel you on that.
As and when I can get around to doing something, something comes out. But yeah, there's a kind of rich catalogue of stuff, of which Mr. Parker there is on quite a lot of them. So please go and check them out. And once again, thank you for recommending the movie and the discussion as well. It's been a hoot.
And Bruce?
So our newest commentary track was for the Hong Kong roughie, Her Vengeance. Vinegar Syndrome just announced that while we were recording this episode, pretty much. A double bill with Devil Fetus. So I worked a bit on that Blu-ray. Our commentary tracks with me and Art Edinger, who's been on a couple episodes of this show, and a friend of ours named Ryan Smith from Dreamhaven Books. So that just got announced, so definitely pick that up, because even if I wasn't on it, I would consider that a top-tier release, because both those movies are a lot of fun. And I think our track for Severin Films for Night Train Murders, I think the retail release of that is coming out. I I think this month or next month. So that's been solicited as well. So that's also available from all your favorite retailers. And I did that one with Art Edinger as well.
Love that movie.
It was so much fun.
That movie.
Yeah.
That was a blind spot for me. It's one
Really?
that I started watching when I was like 15 and never finished.
Right.
And I was like, it's not going to be as good as, House on Itch Park, Last House on the Left, I Spin Every Grave, popped in it. Every bit is good. Every bit is good. And
really
it was so smart. And it was so intelligent of a movie too, which I didn't expect.
Right.
It's great. It's one of the best.
Yeah, Aldo Lado is really kind of a underrated director, which is strange because both his gialli are.
Oh, Short Night at Glass
great.
Dolls is one of my favorites.
Who Saw or Die is great too.
Yeah, I love Who Saw. I actually like Who Saw or Die more than Glass Dolls.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, both of them are, and they're both usually seen as really kind of upper tier gialli. So it's surprising to me that Aldo Lado doesn't seem to get more respect. People don't mention him in the same frame as like Sergio Martino or somebody.
Yeah.
But Night Train Murders, right? Ostensibly, just a Last House on the Left ripoff, but like you said, it's a lot smarter than necessary. Like it actually has like a lot of layers to it. That was a fun one to discuss as well.
I appreciate you guys doing this. It's been great. It's been a good show.
Yeah. No, thanks for having us. Like, I thought this discussion was great. It's always fun to, especially to hear a fresh perspective on it. With Duncan, who had just seen this movie for the first time. And I'm always happy that it finds more fans appropriately. Because, it is really, really an underseen little gem that definitely needs to get more people to see it.
See you guys.
Adios.
Hey.
Ich werde dich zur Welt bringen. Wir werden glücklich sein. Ich weiß, dass du mich liebst. Und auch ich liebe dich.